Hi, this is Bindu. Welcome to the second series of Extended Essay Conversation. In the last series, we focused on choosing the right topic. This time, our focus is on one of the most important aspects of the extended essay journey, which is framing the argue. As I record the second series, it is worth to acknowledge that the extended essay is evolving. The 2027 assessment framework has undergone a change. We now know that there are two research pathways, one which is subject focused and the other which is interdisciplinary, right? So those of who have doubts about which subject does the extended essay belong to can be a little more relaxed now because of the interdisciplinary pathway. There are also changes to the reflection, changes to the marking criteria, and of course the use of newer emerging technologies such as AI. Yes, finding a good research question is often one of the most challenging part of the entire process. There are many questions in our mind whether this is too broad or is it too narrow or is it even worth pursuing. Over the next few conversations, I hope to explore these questions and share some strategies that you may find useful. Once again, it's not meant to be prescriptive or a definitive answer, rather reflections intended to encourage discussions and thoughts, which is how research is meant to be. Now, coming to the first strategy, it's also called the funnel strategy, right? This is a well-tested framework. Basically, in this strategy, you're moving from a broad topic to a focused research question. Now, to move from a broad topic to a focused research question. To take that journey, what I've done is I've given 3 clear steps on, as to how you can arrive at a research question. The first step in that process is choosing the right topic. Now, I have already done a series on how to choose the right topic, and I've also given you a couple of strategies as to how you can arrive. But one of the highlights of that series is a simple mind map that one can use. So if you all recollect, subject, area of interest, phenomena, event or a process, and if you can develop that into a broad question. Now, if you have not looked up the series, do go and look up the series, like, comment, and share. The second step is review the literature. Reviewing the literature is a very, very important step in research, and it's done in a very, very structured manner. But it's something that also should be done by students to arrive at the right research question. So basically, what is review the literature? The review of the literature is basically looking up on already existing studies on the topic to see what is already known. That is the idea behind review the literature in research. But when it comes to extended essay, we are not looking at gaps in already existing knowledge or things of that nature, or to for sake of novelty and other things. But the reason for why it needs to be done is so that we can sort of help us in refining the research question, identifying the samples, variables, methodology. It's a very, very important step, and I think I would encourage students to do this extensively before they arrive at a research question. So what are our digital tools that are available to us through which we can get access to scholarly articles which are relevant to the topic that we want to do our essay on? One such digital tool is your Google Scholar, which is freely available, has got free access, right? So this would, as I said, if you just punch in, put in the keywords, you should be able to retrieve many scholarly articles relevant to your topic. Now, how you do that is, for example, if you have a topic, what is the impact of exercise on the mood states of depressed patients? My search words would be exercise, mood, and depression. So these are the three keywords that I would put in there in my search to be able to get access to publications which is similar to the topic that I want to work on. Any other word should match these tags, right? So that's really how you do it. And you will never use words like impact, effect, or factors. Those are not cannot be used as a tags to arrive at publications that you are looking out for. The other is your school database. School databases are, many IB schools subscribe to these databases. For example, the digital libraries for, which are digital libraries for academic journals, or sometimes they have own database for scientific research articles. And many schools subscribe to JSTOR, EBSCOhost, ProQuest, or Science Direct, and that gives you access to many scientific articles. So JSTOR is largely for English, history, and geography, those kind of subjects. But they do also have. It can be also be used for mathematics and science. For biology, one very good tool is PubMed. Basically, biomedical literature. You can also find something on environment as well. So very valuable digital tool. Then there is ResearchGate, where you can get access to scientific publications. There is a requirement for you to register and get access. So you'll have to fill in your profile, has to be created. So with all the basic requirements, they prefer institutional email, but to be able to get access to the publications. But you can register without the institutional email as well, and thereafter you get access to the research publications. But just in case you don't have, sometimes the full text is not available, there is also an option for request for full text, where a private a message goes to the author, and the author may choose to share the full text with you, right? And that's really how these are some of the tools that one can use and get access to the literature. And you can pull out 4 or 5 or even more, as the more you read is better, right? These publications are pulled out, and then you need to do what is called structure the review. Now, how do you structure the review? When you find a good paper, what do I do with it, right? Now, the first thing to do is to save the citation. You need to be very organized about it. If you're not, then at the end, you will find difficulty in pulling out some of this. When you want to write down your bibliography or do any referencing work, you will have difficulty. So it's very, very important that you're organized about it. So open up a little folder and save this information that this publication that you have with you. From that, certain information needs to be saved up, right? So save the citation, which means the title, the author, the year of publication, and date of publication. Yeah, the year of publication and the date of publication, right? So this information, or sorry, not the date of publication, year and date, of course, and of course the link. I think that is going to be, those are the 4 things that you need to save somewhere. And what you also have to do is to write a short summary. Now, while reading these publications, now how, one strategy that one can use, because these are generally doctorate or postdoc papers, and some of them are extremely complex and, not easy to read, and, you can't make out much of what is given out there. So I would suggest that you stick to only the abstract. The abstract actually gives much of the information without going into too much detail. It tells you what the work is about and generally has some information about the methodology and also the outcome, right? So read the abstract. Definitely read the introduction. The introduction is generally the science aspect of it. Whatever you are finding it difficult, you can just skip. There's no need that you need to understand every word of it. So introduction, methodology, right? So that gives you an idea about what and methodology did they adopt, and the outcome. So in the main body of work, it's only the methodology which is important, and then you can go straight to the outcome. There's no harm in reading to the entire paper, but as long as you can understand, right? So I would just look through these information, and that should give me some idea about what the work was about, right? So write a short summary, and that summary should carry the following. This is for sciences largely, right? The variable that they have used. What sample did they use in this? Was it yeast, bacteria, plant cells, animal cells? What kind of sample did they use? The broad methodology, right? Don't have to give in every detail of what the methodology was, but any, broad methodology that they adopted, and the outcome. So this information, and of course, you can also compare and contrast between this work to what your RQ is, what your intended line of work is, right? For example, you've already thought of the sample that you want to work with. If there is any difference to the sample that this paper suggests, then you can probably, so just write down a brief compare and contrast between what you intend to do and what the topic and the paper that you have read through. So this has to be done religiously. This is a very, very important part of the entire exercise, because you just kind of understand the different kinds of samples that are used, the methodology that they adopted, and all that is going to be a very, very important thing in finally defining your own RQ, right? Yeah, so as I said that, when you're reviewing these papers, just stick to some important things: the abstract, introduction, a bit of the methodology, and the conclusion, right? So those are the broad areas that you can really focus on. Once you've done that, then you define the RQ. Now, this is the funnel strategy. The first was choosing the topic, then came reviewing the literature, and now we are getting down to, once we have reviewed the literature, then we get down to defining the RQ. So narrow your scope down to putting your research question down. You've identified the sample that you want to work with. After going through all that paper, you have identified your variable. You could have also identified the range. This is where the review of literature is very, very helpful. You can identify the range that you want to work on. Sometimes the range, you could do a pre-lab study. That is, of course, that's something that you can do. But then this will also help you to arrive at some kind of range that you will like to use for your IV, and location, time spent. There is all kind of information you can be gathered, and then you can finally get down to defining the RQ. There are some strategies that you can use to evaluate your research question. So there is a standard framework called it's a mnemonic, PICO or PICO or PICOT. It's a standard framework, as I said, where your RQ that you have defined can be put against this framework to know whether you have included all the elements of a well-defined research question. So PICO, or PICOT, as it's called, it's a standard framework that is used in evaluating a research question. It basically was used in clinical studies, but it can be used across sciences. So how do you put your research against this framework? Where here the P stands for basically population or problem, but in the extended essay context, we can say P stands for the sample that is under study, right? We need to have a sample, right? Either a plant cell or an animal cell, or it's a Drosophila melanogaster, or Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or any sample that you plan to use for your study. So that's what P here stands for. I is intervention. The intervention is where the sample has been subjected to something. So pH, temperature, any independent variable can be is what the sample is subjected to. That's really what intervention is. Then we have C. C is basically control, or mainly placebo, or something, some baseline, something to which you can compare your samples with. So that's what C is in this case. And O is the outcome. The outcome is the dependent variable, and T is the time. So these are the important elements of a research question. So you need to see that the research question actually carries all of these elements. So that's what PICOT is. There are other framework for other subjects. Qualitative studies could use SPIDER. That's another mnemonic, SPIDER, or PEU. There are other framework as well, depending on what kind of study is it. But for sciences, we generally use the PICOT. Yeah. So that is as far as the putting it against a standard framework is about. Now coming down to evaluating using another framework, which is called the FINER criteria. Again, this is a mnemonic, FINER criteria. So you will have to put your research question against this criteria to see whether it's actually meeting all of the requirements of the criteria. Now, the third strategy, which I just spoke about, which is to evaluate your research question against the FINER criteria, where the F here stands for feasible, right? Do you need to look at whether your research question is feasible? It's a very, very important thing to consider and have a discussion around to see whether your research question, do you have the necessary skill sets to pursue this research question? Do you have all the resources that you need, right? So that's another very important discussion that you need to, before you form up on the research question. Would you be able to, the time period that is available to you, will you be able to finish it in a given time? So there's a very important feasibility study that needs to be done before you form up on your research question. I stands for interesting. Is it interesting for you to pursue as a researcher, right? And also, will this also be interesting to the scientific community, to the audience? So that is another very important question to ask. Will I be interested 6 months down the line, to carry this forward, right? And will this information also be interesting to others who is reading it? Yeah. So that's another important question to ask. Novel, right? That's what N stands for. Novel is new insight, right? Is it giving any kind of new insight? This is very important for research at the research level, but for extended essay, it's not an absolute must essential element, but it will be great if there is a new insight that has been given. Yeah. So yes, novelty. E is ethical, right? This is extremely important. So when you're doing the research question, you have to ask yourself that whether this is going to be done ethically, whether you're going to be adhering to the experimental policy. Are you putting any kind of unnecessary stress or duress to any animal or a plant or any living species, right? It's very, very important for students of science to look at the ethical aspects, right? And you can't touch body fluids. So there are many, and there's an experimental policy that you need to adhere to. And the last one is relevant, right? Does it have an application value? We're just doing some random science. No, you need to do something that has an application value, right? Which is going to do good to the larger humanity, right? Does it have any direct application, right? So it's another important question to ask. Yeah. So put your question against FINER. The fourth strategy is ask the right kind of question. Or when I say right, can I just like to flip this? Don't ask the wrong questions, right? So what are those wrong questions? Or what are those questions that you need to avoid? Number one, avoid double-barreled question. Question which has two independent variables. Say, for example, how do caffeine concentration and temperature affect the rate of photosynthesis in a load? There are two independent variables. Now, why do we say that using two independent variables are not a great idea? And they can be used. They can be used under certain conditions, and I'm going to tell you what those conditions are. Why it should not be used is, number one, it'll be too many things. You're looking at two independent variables and their effect on the outcome, which means there is much to be done in that 4,000 words. Number two, your research will lose coherence because there are two independent variables that you are exploring in the essay, right? And so therefore, there are two independent things. So you are looking at temperature and you're also looking at caffeine concentration. So there are two absolutely independent things. So therefore, it's always better to stick to one independent variable. Now, you could look at two independent variables if you're looking at the interaction of those two independent variables. I could look at, if I frame a question where I look at the interaction of caffeine concentration and temperature on the rate of photosynthesis, then yes, then I've looked at two variables, but I'm also interested in their interaction. And so therefore, that becomes an important thing, right? Rather than just looking at two independent variables parallel. I can look at more than one dependent variable if I want. For example, if I'm looking at plant or basically how it affects growth of a plant, I could look at the height of the plant, I could look at the number of leaves, I could look at the overall biomass, the root length or a shoot length or the ratio. So there are many parameters that I can. But at the same time, you need to look at how much data that you will be generating and whether that'll be enough to finish off in a 4,000 word essay, and whether you will be able to handle those much data. But yes, more than one dependent variable is okay, but more than one independent variable is not very is not conducive to to explore. The other question that you need to avoid is leading questions. I'll tell you what a leading question is. Why is organic fertilizers more effective than chemical fertilizers? Now, in this question, do you see something? Yes. What do I see here? There are already some biases here, right? Where I've already said that the organic fertilizers are considered to be more effective, right? So what are you trying to establish then, right? The why is organic blood? So there is nothing much to explore in this kind of a question. There is already a statement has been given out. So a leading question is not a great question. So for me, this could be turned around. This question could become, how does the type of fertilizer, whether organic or inorganic, can impact plant growth, right? So yeah, leading questions are not considered a great question for extended essay. Number third is vague and overtly broad questions. We all know that the question needs to be focused. That's one of the most important part of the research questioning. For example, how does climate change affect biodiversity? Too vague and too broad, just too many things. Climate change is many things, increase in temperature to sea level rising, to many things. So yeah, so just too broad and wide. So it's not focusing. So that is one of the things you need to avoid. The other type of question that you need to avoid is questions that has an overlap of one or two subjects. I've seen this problem often coming up in biology, where biology and psychology, there is an overlap, or biology or chemistry. Now with the new research pathway, which is the interdisciplinary pathway, I think there is a sigh of relief that now people can register in two subjects. But remember, registering in two subjects is not enough. There are other requirements of an interdisciplinary pathway, which I'm going to talk about in my other series. But one important requirement for that is that you bring out both the subjects across all elements of the research, all elements of research, that you need to address both the biological aspect and the other subject, whatever that I may consider, or both needs to have, you need to explore both of them equally across through all the elements of research, right? So till then, there is a question, so if you have that question in your mind, whether this is biology or psychology, so you should try and avoid, and there's some critical differences between biology and psychology. Biology is experimental science. We believe we rely on lab experimentation or field studies or measurement, tangible quantitative data. Whereas psychology kind of depends on, it's more on behavioral science, right? How past experiences and environment can impact behavior, right? And so therefore they rely on psychometric analysis. They live in scorecards and survey, which are not very tangible quantities. There is some level of subjectivity, and it's they use a scoring card sometimes. So there are those differences. So yes, so you must avoid questions that are framed. For example, how does listening to classical music affect short-term memory of a high school standard student? So it's a very psychology thing. Anything to do with short-term memory, there are no defined quantities, scientific quantity measurements that can be done. So it becomes outside the realm of science, right? Not to say that they are not science. There is definitely element of science and psychology as well, but there is that difference between biology and psychology. Similarly, biology and chemistry. Now, there's a very important component of biochemistry in biology, where we draw tools and techniques of chemistry, right? And even knowledge of chemistry to explain things that are happening within the human body. Because if you look at human bodies, largely chemical molecules, and the chemistry explains what is happening inside the body. So how do we distinguish what is chemistry and what is biology? So what you need to do then is, again, understand that important difference between the two. Well, I've come to the end of this series. I have tried to include whatever that I thought that was important, and the kind of questions that I used to get as a teacher and supervisor. There could be more, and I will be happy to hear from you that if I have missed out something, and would be happy to hear more questions and challenges that you have faced as far as the research question is concerned. I hope the series was of help to you. And now for the final reflection. A research question is far more than the starting point of an investigation. It is what guides the entire research journey. So it's kind of reiterating that research question is one of the most important aspects of the extended research journey. So invest time in it, right? Read and explore and spend some time finding the right research question. And I'm also ending with an important quote by Voltaire: judge a person by their question rather than by their answers. I see a good research question, I know what is expected. The rest is sort of understood, isn't it? If I find a very, very good research question, I know there's a lot that has gone in. Well, with that, we end this series, and I hope, thank you for listening, and hope you support me in this, and so that I put out more information that I have with me. And well, this is so saying bye to you, and our next series is going to be on methodology and research design, and hope to see you soon. Bye. Take care.